This is Motorsport Radio.
Track limits are fairly easy to spot in circuit racing too. The racing surface is the area between the two white lines that circumnavigate the perimeter and interior of the asphalt circuit. This is a fact you may be surprised to know.
Being a racing driver means you are racing with other people, and if you no longer
go for a gap that exists, you are no longer a racing driver because we are competing.
Back it up a moment.
Hello and welcome to another BTCC Talks with me, Joshua Harrison, and joining me this week is, of course, the lovely Ross McIntyre, who is always trusty and sometimes right. As well as joining me this week, we've got the Connor, who has no boundaries in his knowledge, and of course, returning after a couple of week holiday is, of course, Andy Hopley. And we're going to start this week with a little bit of a difference, because we're going to do a bit of news. I've always fancied myself being a news reader, and I'm going to do some news. So the news that broke this week is, of course, the high-speed racing team that are currently leading the GT2 European Championship in the Audi R8 is switching for the last race of the season to a Brabham BT62. Right, now the significance of this is it will be the first time one of those has ever raced in a European Championship. So, Ross, the Brabham BT62 has obviously seen a bit of success in Australia, but do you think it could immediately jump to the front of the field in Paul Ricard? Oh, Ross, I think someone's gone on mute. He doesn't want to talk to me. So, we'll give. Should we give another go? Go on, give it another go. Go on, Ross. No, still on mute. Never mind. We'll have to ignore him. Right. So, Connor, can we expect the GT2s, the Brabham, to win immediately after it's had a couple of years to get used to the championship, or do you think it will really struggle with the pace of the KTMs and Audis and Ferraris?
Well, the obvious answer is, well, I guess we'll see, as it were. This is one of those cars that's obviously very untested. It's, as you say, the BT63 is a new concept, as it were, for the Brabham team, that they haven't really had as much of a major involvement in the GT2 series as we've seen with other manufacturers. And, this is a great step for, a new competitor in this scene. We've seen very much similar designs throughout the German manufacturers, the Mercedes and the Audis in recent years. And so to have this sort of, British outfits coming back on is fantastic to see. But it will come down. I think there's only two ways this is going to go, which is either it's going to be massively off the pace, or it's going to be not very well BOP'd and win by an absurd amount. I can't see them basically perfecting it straight off. My initial reaction is that it's going to be a little woeful on the pace at the start. It's not going to be able to optimize itself properly. It doesn't know the limits of its own engine over a long race distance. I know it's done tests in the past, and I'm sure those tests have gone very well, but this is it. But we've very rarely seen it in a competitive landscape, and so it will certainly be a learning curve weekend, and I don't think we should be immediately expecting some sort of heroic result out of it. Of course, saying that, we could have another. It is Brabham after all. We could have another Brabham fan car situation in which there is some revolutionary concept about how this car is set up, and it dominates the race and ends up getting disqualified before next year. So I guess Brabham have a history in that sense as well.
Yes, it is actually named after, obviously, the famous Brabham racing driver, and the company is actually run by Jack Brabham, the Australian. So it's got a lot of history in itself. David Brabham, sorry, yeah. It's got a lot of history. And, of course, Paul Ricard, as we know, is a very fast, low downforce circuit with a lot of runoff area, so you can feel safe pushing a car to and beyond its limit. We've seen it at Goodwood, we've seen the Brabham at Silverstone, we've seen the Brabham all over the place doing these test runs, these demonstrations, but it would be good to finally see it in a competitive environment. Now, Andy, is the GT2 series becoming the new GT1 series that we saw the start of the 2010 series with the Maserati MC12s and all a variety of those? Is it becoming another big, great GT series?
I think personally it could be. I'm not too sure because of how it goes within, obviously, like we said, with the MC12 from Maserati, it may be just about the bigger concept. It may be better when they get more, obviously, cars onto that grid. But obviously, you know, GT2 is spectacular. It's more, obviously, beneficial budget-wise compared to, like, GT3, GT4. But it could be a GT1 class come the end of the season and start of next year.
Yeah, exactly. And then the next news that's breaking is, of course, that happened on Sunday, which was the 8th round of the NLS Championship in Germany, where we saw a Augusto Farfus driving a car that has been controversial in the way it looks, but he drove it to 5th on the grid. Now, if Ross has a voice...
I hopefully do. Can you hear me now?
Yes, he does. That's good. Right. So, obviously, it shows BMW are back in the GT program all the way through the next couple of years, which is good to see. But the question I wanted to ask you first, Ross, is what do you think is the best-looking BMW GT car in the past? Obviously, with this new M4, with its big snout and all this sort of thing, it's not the best. But what would you say was the best looking?
It's not a question I expected to be asked, to be honest, but we'll give it a go anyway. To be brutally honest, I've never been a big fan of BMW's GT cars. I love their road cars. I think their road cars look fantastic. But in terms of racing cars, I actually think they kind of hit its best with their Class 1 stuff and then some of the stuff they had back in the 80s, you know, the touring cars. I don't think a lot of their GT efforts, I've actually been quite unimpressed with the visuals. I mean, visuals aren't really relevant, but, you know, I guess the quote, if it looks fast, it is fast, kind of comes into play here. I mean, the M6 GT3 was okay, I guess. I actually really liked how the M8 GTE looked. I know it was a big old beast, but I really like that car. That's just the BMW fanboy in me coming out a bit, but I really liked how it looked. That being said, I think this new M4 looks fantastic. Don't like how the road going variant looks, but I think the race car looks absolutely phenomenal. It looks super, super aggressive out on track. And obviously, as you said, finishing 5th in the NLS, you know, they've clearly got some belief in the car. They're clearly backing it. You know, they've had a couple test races here and there. This was the first trial by fire, so to speak. And even then, it was much more about, you know, we're just going to run round and see how we do. We're not going to push for performance. We're not going to push for position. We're just going to put the car out there, put it on a race sim, you know, maybe hit like a pretty low target lap time, nothing too testing, and just see how it does. And it did pretty well, you know, coming 5th. That is not bad at all. So they, you know, it looks fantastic. They clearly have a lot of belief in the car. To be brutally honest, out of the GT cars they've done, I think it's the best one they've done so far. Again, not a fan of the road going version, but I think the race car just looks absolutely. I think it just looks brilliant. It's aggressive. The front end looks fantastic. It's really low to the ground. Reminds me of their Class 1 car, the DTM car that they had, the last DTM car. I thought that looked spectacular, but I don't think that quite counts as GT. So I won't include that in. To be honest, yeah, no idea what my favourite looking one is, to be brutally honest, but this one is definitely high up on the list already, and it looks like it's been running all right so far as well.
Yeah, you see, for me, I used to love the Z4 GTEs. They looked cool. Everything about them, they looked cool. But watching the M4, I couldn't take my eyes off its nose. Like, it's the grills. I couldn't take my eyes off it. It's really distracting. The rest of the car looks really good, but all you look at is those two grills. But as you said, it's it did really well, and it does look like it's going to be a great concept. And for anyone who is listening who's running a GT car for the British GT next year, it's only €140,000, right? Which, when you consider how much a GT car you'd think would cost, €140,000 for an M4 GT3 isn't that bad. So it's showing some sustainability within the GT, and it's still making it quite affordable. Connor, what do you think about that,
Josh?
I think you've done a very good job of making sure BMW sponsor this stream, but no. I mean, as you say, if we're talking about the look of the car, then looks can very much be deceiving. I mean, I talked about the Brabham fan car before in the section before this, but that era was filled with, Formula One teams making various changes to the look of their car to basically hide the actual, what was actually giving them the performance. People might remember the skirts on F1 cars that were in the 80s that were all the rage. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's a similar deal at play here. BMW have done a ridiculous looking nose, as it were, which I'm sure looks which I'm sure looks fun. But there might be something else about the engine or the setup, or even the aerodynamics of the car elsewhere that is the actual reason it's done so well. As you say, though, first race, 5th place around the Nordschleife, very impressive performance. I've seen I've seen debut cars do far worse around a much simpler circuit. And I think that's the other point, which is they had their first test around arguably one of the hardest circuits in the world, one of the most demanding and a circuit with big alterations, as it were. So it really gives a lot of confidence for the M6 moving forward, because it proves that you can basically take it to any track around the world and go, yeah, it's going to run well here, and you can learn a lot from running at the Nordschleife to apply on most other tracks around Europe. And it's that sort of adaptability that BMW will be thriving off of for the next couple of months, as you say, they look to show off what their car can do to other buyers, to other race teams as well that are looking for a new car for their new GT season in 2022.
And it's also, don't forget, of course, that Le Mans are looking at bringing in GT3 cars for the Le Mans 24 hours. BMW have already sold some of the M4s to IMSA, to the teams over in America, so we'll see them at the Daytona 24 hours. I believe they've got entries in the NLS, and I believe they've got entries into the GT3 European series as well. So they've obviously selling well, because the M6 has now been dropped by the factory, so there's no factory-backed M6s anymore. It's all M4s. So maybe we'll see them in the British GT series. We'll wait and see, of course, over the winter when we start seeing the new teams coming out with their new cars. But another team that's come and sort of taken part and wants to be part of the NLS, which seems to be improving size and performance, and also the skills of the drivers. Aston Martin have come out and said next year they're going to be running a full factory-backed team in the NLS. Now, Andy, this is obviously showing that the NLS is something that everyone wants to be a part of. It's racing on Nürburgring, it's loads of endurance races. If you haven't done it before, it's great to watch. There's such a variety. It's such a difficult challenge to do. But would you say now that the NLS has become bigger than DTM in Germany?
Oh, that's a killer question. To be honest, Josh, I think yes, because now that DTM has now gone to GT3 specification, then obviously the touring car version, I think the NLS is bigger and better, because obviously it has a lot more variety, and obviously, it combines a lot with the Nordschleife and stuff like that. But it's bigger than DTM. It seems to be attracting a lot more manufacturers than DTM is doing at the moment. But obviously, we'll have to see what happens next season. Obviously, with Aston Martin, like as you say, bringing a works team over, it's going to be a big spectacle, and it is bigger than DTM, in my opinion.
Yeah, they're going to be driven by Nicky Thiem and Maxime Martin, so they're obviously going to be going for the outright victory. They've not brought some reserve drivers over; they've brought some properly skilled drivers over. And don't forget as well, DTM doesn't have a factory team competing in it yet. It's all teams just using independent cars. So I think, and we've obviously had this debate many times over the next couple of months, and probably had it before as well. I still believe DTM made a huge error in going to what is already a very competitive GT3 environment. I think they had a unique aspect. Yes, it was expensive. They could have made it a bit more cheap and sustainable, but they had a unique thing. They've gone to GT where, you've got the NLS, which is a GT series. You've got a variety of other GT series as well. And it's lost its impact. It's lost its attraction. It's just another GT series. But talking of GT series, of course, over in UK, where we are, obviously, we need to talk more about this sort of stuff. But the Czech brand of Praga have announced a support package for the GT Cup and Brit Cup Endurance series that's been running a few years around the British circuits. Of course, it's great to see loads of different cars, loads of different classes taking part. And again, this is going to be part of our big debate if we've got time later on. But Praga, with their R1 prototype, have said they're going to be running a 21 car field with a 2-driver lineup per car. And this has already been confirmed in 2022. So the question I ask you, Connor, is could you see this as one of the first steps towards Praga becoming like Glickenhaus, endurance prototypes manufacturer, or a GT one of these big prototype manufacturers that are making GT cars?
It's certainly a start, and one I think the Czechs will be, very interested to look at. We've seen a lot with. You mentioned Glickenhaus. There's probably quite an interesting one there, because we've seen a lot of prototype manufacturers in recent years, the independent ones, try and make that leap up to Le Mans. We had. We've had Rebellion for a couple of years, and prior to that we had Bicolis, and they've all struggled at the top end. LMP1 has always been the big bugbear for anyone that isn't Audi or Porsche in the last 10 years, basically, or Toyota even. So we are left with a sense of there isn't really a lot of room for independent manufacturers to get onto the prototype scene, and so we do end up an awful lot now with them stuck in the LMP2 class, where it's all very much spec series, as it were. Obviously, that's not entirely true, but I think a lot of people know what I mean when I say there's a lot of similarity between the LMP2 cars. As a result, I'm not quite sure what the long-term goal here is for Prague, other than maybe become a standard, say, LMP2 chassis manufacturer in that sense, but maybe it does open the door for something new, a bit of an independent wave of prototype cars that perhaps aren't on the Le Mans level but have their own standalone level. I think that Praga making their own series is probably actually quite a nice way to go about this. If anything, we can sort of make comparisons here with Ginetta. Obviously, Ginetta, very famously in the UK, have their own variety of spec series that all lead up to Ginetta prototype cars that's raced in European Le Mans and the like. And so we could see Praga sort of set up a feeder program, as it were, to allow them a route into ELMS, or as I mentioned, LMP2 in the World Endurance Championship category, and so have a strong sort of junior program that in the next 5-10 years they can work on to become a big established brand, rather than spend a lot of money to get immediately to their goal of racing in Le Mans or being a European Le Mans Series team, and then lose it all because they don't have the the technical staff, the ability to pay certain designers or engine manufacturers, or even the engineers and the drivers to come in, as it were, as I said. So by building up slowly, having a spec series in the UK, getting the contacts, as it were, not just for the drivers but for the engineers who will maintain these cars, and then promoting them to perhaps say a future team in years to come. Praga could be having a very good long-term strategy with this in terms of where they want to be, and perhaps, who knows, maybe this is the route to get them to actually compete in whatever incarnation LMP1 or LMPH will have in the future at the 24 Hours of Le Mans. So we'll see. Their partnership with Britcar has been very successful this year, and as Mark Harrison, their managing director, said, they've seen fantastic growth this year with their brand, and I know an awful lot of that does come down to PR talk. Of course it does, but we've seen Praga come from effectively nothing in the mid 2010s to where they are now, and if nothing else, it gives young drivers in the UK a chance to experience prototype cars before reaching the European level. We had the LMP3 Cup a couple of years back that I'm sure some of you guys remember, but that never went anywhere because LMP3 was a bit of a dead category, as it were. There's nothing to develop there, and it's one that lots of teams just use for learning work and how to build LMP2s properly, basically. So to have a completely unique category is one that I think Praga can learn from, and one that means it doesn't have to compete with other European series of a similar ilk.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what's intriguing as well is the fact that this is a Czech brand that has chosen the UK to launch it. They haven't gone to the likes of Germany or Poland or Russia or anywhere like that where, which is more local to them to launch it. They've come over to the UK to launch it. And I think that's what's good. As you said, this year they've had, I think they've had 8 cars in their own class within the Britcar Racing Series, which was obviously very successful. So 21 car grid on its own racing series next year could be the start to a ladder system like we've seen with Ginetta Juniors, Ginetta GT5, GT4s, GT3s, all the way through up to the LMP cars that we had. And I think it's going to be, as I said, it's going to be a good series. But it will also, I think, expand the brand in the fact that on road cars, people will see this championship. Oh, that's a nice car. Oh, I fancy getting myself a bit of race car action. Suddenly they'll do that, like they've done with the KTMs, Caterhams, Aerials, all that sort of stuff. Radicals. It will launch, and I think it's a great, exciting prospect, and it's another series that the UK can be proud of having, racing around some of the best circuits in the world. But we are now going to move on to, I think, something that everyone's been waiting for, and that is, of course, the dissection of Silverstone. Yay! Which won't be easy because, how do you sum up possibly 3 of the most exciting races of the calendar? And 3 of the most exciting races I remember in a number of seasons into 30 minutes, 60 minutes or so. But we'll give it a go. And of course, we will start with race 1. And of course, we will start with this one driver who, above all else, leaves you asking constantly the question, how? And that is, of course, Ash Sutton. How did he set a lap record with 75 kilos on his car? That's the whole point of this success balance, was to stop this very thing happening. And then Sutton does it. So, Andy, how is Ash Sutton so quick and doing lap records with 75 kilos in his car?
Again, it's a good question, and it's a debate that I could easily get involved in. It just shows the pace of the Infiniti, because obviously with it being a new car, but obviously 75 kilos, he's worked magic with it over the winter and obviously developing it last year. But to get a last record and to smash that, it's like, what? I thought we were meant to be pegging it back, not making it more easier for someone like him who's now probably on the cusp of winning his third title. It's hard to tell, but it's an amazing achievement. But, I don't know about the rest of you, but it's shocking to really think, well, why successful is even there, though?
I mean, to show you just how mental this is, Sutton didn't go quicker for the rest of the day. The quickest lap he ever set over the weekend was lap 3, race 1, with 75 kilos in his car. I mean, so what they're basically saying is the car is at its quickest when it's at its heaviest on cold tyres in a queue full of traffic. Connor, just how? Like, surely is there a way of slowing Sutton down to make it worthwhile?
Well, you cannot stop Ash, clearly. In terms of the actual lap time, I mean, there was all sorts of excuses we could make for this. Oh, he was in the tow of another driver at the time, and the track was, he was already, rubbed in from the race before. But it would have been more rubbed in by the end of the day. It would have been warmer by the end of the day. Yada yada yada. The only real thing I can take away from this is, as you say, that car is set up so perfectly, so well that there is clearly going to be a lot more to come from that car in the next 2-3 years when it's developed to its fullest, and might prove that in the future years that Silverstone is just such an infinity track that it becomes a venue synonymous with the brand. The other thing, obviously, to point out is Silverstone is a circuit. The BTCC circuit of Silverstone is one with very few braking points. And when you are carrying weight, one of the biggest issues is acceleration out of a corner. If you've got more weight, it's harder to accelerate around a corner. With Silverstone's layout, it's all about momentum. You go turn 1, bit of braking, but you mostly throw it in, especially with as I'm sure we've mentioned, track limits being mostly thrown out of the window for a lot of this. You can carry a lot of momentum. And even then through sort of maggots, you've got the same issue there. Light tap of the brake, make sure you just carry all that momentum through. And then the only real major issue for anyone carrying, significant amounts of ballast is going to be that braking point down into Brooklands, where if you cannot get the car stopped quick enough and then accelerate back up again through Woodcut, I think it is. My apologies, my corner names are going over my head now. But that's going to be your real issue with a lot of weight. But even that is not a quick acceleration corner. It's a slow corner, but it's a long, slow corner, which gives a lot of drivers a neutral point to start back up again. And I think that's the point, which is I don't think it's a case of the weight being an issue. It's not affecting the cars or whatever, but at a circuit like Silverstone, weight is not a major issue because weight affects you when you brake, and you do not brake around Silverstone.
Yeah, I mean, there is only 2 major braking points on that Silverstone circuit, and Sutton probably would have a bit of an issue with the cornering, but again, there's only 4 corners on that track. And again, the track limits we will discuss towards the end of the BTCC talk, because that will be a big discussion. It'll be something that I reckon there'll be a lot of points to mention. But Ross, I suppose you could say finally the Toyotas have done what we expected them to do at the start of the season, which is win.
Finally is one way to put it. My goodness me. It took them long enough, didn't it? It's safe to say the Toyotas overall have been disappointing this season. They came in, this is the first season they've officially had backing from Toyota UK. So I think there was a lot of expectations put on their shoulders. For one reason or another, it didn't come together, and they've been struggling. That being said, finally got it sorted. This weekend was absolutely fantastic for them. Obviously, We've seen Rory Butcher winning in race 1 and coming P2 in race 2 as well, which was, phenomenal for him. Big deal of points there as well. I was going to boost him a lot of places in the championship. I'll check where he is in a moment. But yeah, it's disappointing it's taken them this long to sort it out. And a Silverstone of all places, that's kind of, it's a bit of a weird track to me because as kind of said, it's such a unique circuit and it's basically just kind of 3 straight lines and a few corners. It's not very technical. The national circuit is very flat as well. When you're thinking of cops coming onto the back stretch, maybe there's a bit of an incline, but it's not much, honestly. So it's like the one circuit they could have won at, they have won at, which is disappointing. Yeah, you know what? They won, and I got a second. That's fine by me. As I said, taking them long enough, and it's good to see them back up there, especially after I wouldn't say it's been a rough season, but it's been a bit of a disappointing season. It's been a bit of a disappointing package, and as a whole, from both the team, the cars, the drivers, it's just not quite clicked. To see it finally come together at Silverstone was it was nice to see, and we'll just have to see if they can keep hold of it for the rest of the season, because it's again, Silverstone is a very, very unique track in that it's very, I don't want to say easy, but it kind of is. It's a few straights and a few corners. So we'll just have to wait and see, whether they just got a huge straight line advantage, got the car set up right, got the pressures right as well. Again, because even if it is easy for the drivers, it's very hard to set a car up for. Because, do you go for the corners? Do you go for the slower section? Do you go for the faster section? Whether they got the setup right, whether they just got the tyres in the zone. It's a lot of the stuff we won't know. As always in motorsport, we don't know what setup they're running, what kind of tyre philosophy they've gone for, what the team meetings are saying. But what matters is that they want to race, and hopefully that's some form going forwards.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so I think the most disappointing of all for everyone was simply that Toyota were really good with Tom Ingram last year, and the year before, and the year before, etc., etc. They get manufacturers back in this season, and then they go backwards dramatically. And everyone's sitting there going, well, hang on a minute. So you get more money, better funding, better supply of products. You potentially get better research and development, and yet it made your car worse. But
I mean, surely that just shows the magic of Tom Ingram.
Well, yeah, that's what I was about to say. Is it? I don't want to sound like I'm insulting Butcher or Smell. I mean, they're really good drivers to be on the grid in the first place. But surely it just shows that they do not have the level that Tom Ingram does.
Yeah, it's we know that Ingram is one of the finer drivers on the grid. And touring cars is an odd series in that the distinction between the good drivers and the excellent drivers is actually quite a large gap. So the fastest guys, the people that could go to any series, you're thinking, they could go to V8 Supercars, they could go over to GT, which they could go over to IndyCar, frankly, and do well. Those are the top guys, and then there's a big gap, and then there's kind of everyone else. People like Tingram, Ash Sutton. I know we were talking about earlier about how do we stop him? How is he that good? And I was tempted to chime in and say he dragged a Subaru to a championship. I don't think that needs any further explanation. I've said it before on this show. That car had no right to even be in a championship fight, let alone winning it, and that's what he did. So, Tingram, Ash Sutton, those guys, those are the drivers who are just a step above the rest in BTCC. So I think when you've got them at your team, it's just a bit of a false alarm, really, just to how good you are, because they're overdriving the car, not in the sense that they're pushing too hard, as in they're just outperforming it. I think that's what Toyota suffered with Tingram. They were achieving great results with him, and I was gone away, and suddenly they've gone, we've now got manufacturer backing. Yeah, the manufacturer backing won't have done too much this year because the car would have already been, finalised and settled. It will be more next year that comes into effect. But it would have been, hang on, what's going on? We're not winning races anymore. Similar thing with laser tools, I think. I think this year, it started to come to me. Last year, you saw Sutton get in the car, and the car was a lot more competitive than the Subaru that he was in previously. But I don't think last season's Infiniti was, any better than the BMW. I still thought the BMW was the best car last season, and Sutton got in and drove away. This year, I think the Infiniti has been greatly improved with his input and with investment in the right places, and Moffat's been improving alongside him as well. So now you're starting to see his teammates starting to get a little bit higher up the grid, starting to get some good weekends, some good results in, when previously they were just struggling, and then in reality it was just him doing what he does best and driving around quicker than everyone else. So I think that's what Toyota have suffered with. They've suffered with that top driver curse that is quite unique to touring cars, in that the cars aren't good enough, but the drivers are too good almost. So it kind of balances out and seems really, really good. So now Tingram's gone over to Hyundai. I think it's been a bit of a wake-up call. So now they've kind of sat around and gone, oh, it's not actually quite as good as we thought it was. It was actually all Tom. Again, that's a bit of a naive move because they would have seen the driver data, so they surely would have known that. But, it's just an assumption. But yeah, I think, next year the funding from Toyota UK, the official backing will come into play. It will come into play with the car development. They will have Toyota's, official input in how the car's built, in what to do, the design philosophy, the setup philosophy as well, how they're going to set the car up. Toyota will have a say in that because they'll go, oh, we think you did this because, Toyota, they've got some decent motorsport experience. So next year, I think we'll be seeing them jumping back up again. But this season, I think it was just a bit of a wake-up call and just, evidence to, well, in reality, not rely on your drivers.
Well, that's it. And then one of the big points over the whole weekend, all three races, I think we started to see the championship fight taking full effect in the race. And it was Cook, Sutton and Turkington. They were always together. They were having a nice little dogfight, but at the same time, they weren't taking the risks, where they could lose loads of points on each other. Hill wasn't involved in this. So the question I'll ask you, Andy, is even though Hill is there in the championship fight, is what we saw at Silverstone, Cook, Sutton, Turkington, the title fight, and Hill is just there, but he will always be there and never winning? Or it was Hill just not able to do what he expected him to do, and he was having another fight and trying to get through, and it just didn't work for him?
It's a bit of both, really, isn't it? If you think about it, he's obviously on the sidelines just in case anything goes wrong with the likes of Josh Cook and obviously Colin Turkington and Ash Sutton. He's obviously there just in case they make a huge, massive mistake with 6 races to go and 2 rounds left. But to get to where, even though he won at Silverstone and obviously at Croft, to get where he's now, he needs to be pushing his way for that title fight to join that group. It's a bit 50-50 in my opinion, but the thing is, like you say, Sutton, Turkington and Cook were thereabouts all the time, but Jake needs to push himself forward if he's at the back towards the midfield, not directly at the back, but he needs to push himself into that range to get exactly where he is if he wants to win the title. So he needs to be up with the 3. That's what I think, but that's just personally me.
Because the irony of it all, of course, is obviously the standings are like this. So Sutton's at 210, miles ahead of, in BTCC terms, he's practically won the title. 30 points in BTCC. Let's not
get ahead of the game, Josh. Still a few races left.
No, hear me out. In BTCC terms, a 30-point lead is huge. Okay, we're used to 1 point. 30 points is huge. All right. And then we've got Tom Ingram at 180. Again, a driver who you never counted
Josh,
as a title fight. Go on.
Josh, is that the post or pre-Silverstone?
This is on their official website. So, I'm guessing it's the right one. No, there we go. It's just updated. That's nicer than just updated. That's
Well,
so nice.
to repeat that all again because it's even more
So-
now.
Ash Sutton is on 285. That's more like it.
There
Right.
you go.
So he's gained 75 points in 3 races, which is very well done. You know, Plato famously said that 30 points a meeting is enough to win the championship.
He now
So-
has a 36-point lead.
Yeah, and he's now got a 36-point lead, which means he's won the championship and he's already starting next year's championship. And then you've got Tom Ingram is at 249, but again, Tom Ingram is a driver who even though you know he's there, you still don't think he's got enough to get there. Same thing with Jake Hill, 2 points off. But then you find that Colin Turkington and Josh Cook are there. Now, Josh Cook is some 63 points off the title, but this was due to his bad start of the season. He's been doing really well. He's been scoring really consistently.
I mean, I would like you to define bad stars, considering he won the first 2 races of the season.
It
On the
was,
first 2 races, then nothing else. I think
Yeah.
is what
Okay.
you're trying to aim
he,
for.
he sort of dropped off the cliff after the first meeting. It was, we started thinking, well, hang on a minute. And then, of course, Proctor came in, and Proctor was doing really well, but Cook was still rubbish. And then he's come in, I think, after the break at Croft and Thruxton and Croft and all this. And suddenly he's got himself in a title fight. But 62 points is a lot to make up. So, Connor, is 62 points impossible to make up on Sutton, and therefore can we count him out? Even though it's BTCC, I know you go, anything can happen in British touring cars and all this, but on the previous championships, can we say now that it is only Turkington, Hill, Ingram and Sutton for the title?
Yes. I mean, let's be honest and go back to Ross's point in that, let's be honest, it's Sutton versus Sutton screwing it up. There is, the momentum is entirely with the championship leader at the minute, in that sense. Cook, he's done a fair job. As you say, mathematically, he's still in it, but that disqualifications in the second race for the ride height issue was the nail in the coffin. He's not going to win the championship. In fairness to Cook, he might still have a good end of season. He might get top 3 if he's really lucky with some of the others with Ingram and Hill and Turkington and all that. But generally, I think Cook is out of it for the overall title now, as it were. I will like to point out that at the very start of this year, when we did the Thruxton review, I said keep an eye out for Jake Hill. He's going to be notable in this championship, and I'm not saying you guys ignored me or poo-pooed me or anything like that, but it wasn't really given much thought at the time, let's say. And I would like to put my flag in the ground now and go, I've been with Hill since round 1, guys. I said he'll come back, he'll do it, trust me. And in fairness, we've seen that from Hill. He hasn't finished, with the exception of that first race at Silverstone last weekend, he hadn't finished outside the top 10 in any race since Brands Hatch, right the way back at the 3rd round of the season. He's been consistently in the top 5 for the last 4 rounds, basically. He's got 2 wins in that time, one at Croft, now here again at Silverstone. Hill is the man on a momentum, and honestly, while I don't know if anyone could realistically catch Sutton at this stage, I think the guy with the best chance of doing it right now is Hill. He's got that consistency about him. My only thing will be how much he can deal with the weight ballast at Donington. I think that is something he struggled with slightly in previous rounds, but as I said, after the break, it's been a completely new Jake Hill, and I really want to see him, take on someone like Ingram, who, as you and Ross were pointing out earlier, and Andy, sorry, Ingram is a driver who drives his team forward. I think one of the big things to come out of this year is, as you say, just how important a good driver is to actually winning the championship. You can't just make a good car and stick anyone in it and just assume it'll be there or thereabouts in the title fight that we've seen with certain other motorsport series, let's say. But very much so in British touring cars, the driver is key. And we've seen this with Sutton last couple of years. We are seeing this now with Ingram. You've got to consider Ingram one of the best drivers on the grid at the minute. You've got to consider him a top three along with Turkington. And I think someone like Jake Hill is really starting to put a marker down that he may not be one of the best at the minute, but he is a team leader, and any team would be valuable to have him as someone who could strive the development of their car forward in years to come.
Yeah, exactly. And you brushed on it earlier on, so we'll keep on it. And it was something that happened.
Sorry for really sideswiping your Josh Cook point there. My apologies about that.
Yes, that's fine. But something that, again, we're still talking about Joe Cook. Something that happened in race 3 that made me about as angry as Max Verstappen makes me on a daily basis. All right. If you watch the F1 show, you will totally understand why Ross and Connor are currently looking scared, right?
It's not even started. I've already given up hope.
And this was Josh Cook getting disqualified because of damage to his car that meant the roller pin couldn't go underneath his car. Now, I'm not angry at Cook. I'm angry at the scrutineers, because this has happened for a number of drivers over this season, last season, etc., right? Where a car gets damaged and for whatever reason rides lower than it should do because of the damage, but because of damage that was sustained not by the driver, he then gets disqualified. So he's getting penalised for someone else hitting him, or penalised for being forced off the track, or something like this. Surely there has to be something to be done by the scrutineers to stop disqualifications of drivers on the ride height. Why can't they test the ride height at the start of the race, for example? Or why can't they... or something like this. So, Andy... surely they've got to stop this, because this ruins the touring cars, it ruins the race, it ruins the championship. Josh Cook's got disqualified. He's potentially now at the championship because of it.
Yeah, the thing is, Josh, like we said before we went on air, something has to be done. I don't 100% think it's the right thing to throw him to the back of the grid for failing the ride height because of its damaged limitation, but now it's damaged potentially his chance to go and win the championship. It's not I don't think it's the right thing to do. Like, yeah, but if we test it, like we said before the race starts, you're going to be doing that every race, which then might take a bit more time to get every single car through that ride height check to make sure everything is in order. But then it's, I don't know, it's something that we discussed in length, but I feel like something needs to be done, because if bodywork, or like for example Josh Cook did go on the grass and that potentially broke and then failed the ride height, they've not really looked at other components to say, well, actually this has been broke during that contact, that's why it has failed its ride height. It's just automatically with the front splitter on the left-hand side being lower than the right-hand side. So what difference does that make if both sides then get broke? Does it automatically then fail the ride height because both sides have been broke? They don't look at any other component to say, well, actually it's this. Because now BTC Racing are now taking it further because they want to appeal, because they weren't happy with exactly just being failed on that. They want to take it further, which won't happen until the end of the season now. So that could be a very interesting thought for later on in the year to see what actually is the outcome of that. But it's kind of in a way 50-50. To me, half it's ridiculous, half of me thinks, well, rules are rules. But then I've been following the championship for 22 years. and ride height wasn't really a major issue in Super Touring era because of the front splitter and the rear wing that came into action in '95. So I don't know. It's something that I don't really want to get really argumentative and very hefty debated, but it's something needs to be done. Something really needs to be done before I change my mind.
Yeah, I mean, the official statement from BTC, they're saying that when Josh Cook went over the grass, he damaged the wishbone on the right front of the car, which as a result made the car ride lower. And that meant obviously that it failed the ride height on the right side. We saw from the video, it was going underneath the car on the left-hand side. So it's not like he's failing it. It's just that for only like a corner of the car is failing it. So, you know, so he's getting disqualified from a race because of one corner, which the scrutineers could easily have said, well, yeah, you can see that's broken. That's obviously not going to fit, but we can't disqualify a car because of a bit of broken. I mean, this is a very competitive tin top championship, which is going to have contact. You know, you're going to have bits break on the car and all of this. And we've seen it with Shedden. I remember Shedden got disqualified from a race at Brands Hatch once, and if I remember rightly, that lost him the championship there and then. I think Giovinazzi was penalised and then sent to the back of the grid, which meant that even though he still managed to win the championship, he had to rely on other drivers to retire to do this. It's, you know what I mean? It's bringing something else into the championship, which we don't want to see. It's bringing rules. It's bringing, you know, like you got for FIA and all this sort of thing. It's bringing scrutineers into the championship fight, which is not what you want from British touring cars from a fan's perspective.
No, but then going back to a point that obviously, you know, he's had to carry the second place weight penalty as well because of after getting disqualified. Is that something else that's going to be a massive debate? Because should that really be fair that he's carrying that weight when he's lost that position because of failing ride height? You know, okay, I've heard that people said on social media, don't really want to jump in which social media platforms, but they're saying, well, he shouldn't really be carrying that weight then. But then it's like, well, he's got a bit of an advantage to push his way back up to the front in the next race. But I don't know, it's something that baffles me, and I'll be endless having hefty debates with people about it for weeks on end if I'm not careful. But that's something else we've got to take into consideration.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Ross, do you want to weigh in on this? It's obviously, you don't want the touring cars to be a sort of championship decided by rules, decided off the grid. You want it to be decided. And as Andy said, you know, Cook got disqualified for something that, yes, he was his fault. He went across the grass, but I mean, it's a random choice. I think 3 cars get this weight, this ride height check on the grid, and it's any 3 cars. But surely, you can't say that, oh yeah, well, Cook's now at the championship because he was disqualified because of a broken front splitter on the right hand, or a broken front wishbone on the right hand side. He's then got to start race 3 at the back of the grid with, 60 odd kilos, which is not going to get him anywhere.
It's again, as Andy said, we've seen this many a time before in BTCC, and every time I get the exact same response from everyone is, "And why is this happening?" And then BTCC go, "Oh, I don't know," and then just carry on as they do and forget about it. And then 6 months later, same debate crops up again. It's been doing this for years now. It's a tricky one. On the one hand, I understand it's the rules. They've come up with those rules, and they randomly select 3 cars. If your car, on paper, if your car does not pass the ride height check, you've broken the rules. But obviously, if you've taken damage, then technically they can't legitimately check the ride height of the car. So what they should be doing is allowing you to repair the car, but then that breaks park family conditions, so they can't then check the car properly, so you get disqualified again. So it's just, they've clearly written the rule in a lot of haste and not really put a lot of thought into it. And now it's just so far in, they can't really do anything about it. I understand the rule. I actually think it's quite a good rule. Obviously you want to make sure that, the ride height isn't too low. There are solutions. You suggested that they measure the ride height of cars pre-race. That's a possibility. Look, gotta be honest, I don't think they quite have the budget in BTCC to come up with the technology to drop the car after at the start of the race. So I don't think that's a danger of happening. Another one is they don't check damaged cars. However, I know in NASCAR they had a period of that where they would damage cars they get away through, and then they caught Jimmy Johnson purposely damaging the car during a burnout after he won a race to basically break a bit of the car that was illegal. They didn't check it. And once they caught them out, they clocked onto it, and suddenly, that became very illegal very quickly to do that. So the only logical solution is to do it pre-race, or to literally get someone to come around with a ruler, like just check the other side of the car, get someone to jack the car up. Maybe you can say this bit looks good, and they can watch you repair that one bit of the car to where it is, and then they do it. Because you get special conversation. Stewards, I'm sure it's fine. They literally go, we can't do safety checks, we can't do legality checks because the car's broken. So we'll allow you to fix the section of the car. If it's had a big hit, maybe just a bit before the car, but the back end, just fix the floor area as long as you can fix it. So just let them fix the bit that's getting in the way, or allow them to do this legality check and make sure and make sure that it's done to exactly the same specifics as it was prior to the incident. I think that's a pretty good solution. I mean, it's probably a logistical nightmare in reality. I'm just some random kid sitting in his room talking into a microphone and a webcam about this. I'm not a trained professional with years in the business, but it's it's very clear the rule is old-fashioned. I think it's clearly outdated. It needs fixing. It's just up for debate what the solution is. I think the repair one could work, maybe, but the only one I think that would work in my head is the free race one, and that is, I think, would only work in BTCC because they don't have the budget to install some fancy suspension that would drop the car down lower once the race is started.
I mean, something that Tim Harvey said, which is, I think, is a solution which I think is great, is write into the rules that if the team can prove that the component that's causing the ride height failure was broken during the race, but broken in such a way that it wasn't purposely broken. You know what I mean? So it was broken over a curb, or broken during an accident, or broken during a crash. So they haven't purposely.
That's quite easy to do as well, because if the car's got an onboard camera on it, you just show them that, or you just show them the data. That's actually quite easy.
So that in that case, then, so BTC Racing would go to the scrutineers and go, look, Josh's car's failed because of the wishbone. The wishbone was broken when Cook went over the grass, which you can see quite clearly. As soon as he came on the track, you could see after that, every time he went around the corner, you could see that corner of the car bouncing around. You could see the wishbone was broken. I could see that from the TV, that there's something wrong with the suspension. You could see he was off the pace. The car was broken, right? So why isn't there not something in that says, okay, so your car is broken. It's broken because of a wishbone. The wishbone was broken during the race, so it's not purposely done to break the rules. That's fine. Your car is, because they can do the fixed part of the car. Right, it fits. It's fine. Done. We understand that broken because of that. Move on. Surely that's got to be something that. Why are they not doing that now? Why are they not allowing teams to say, well, hang on, my car has failed the ride height because, the wishbone's broken, or because the suspension's collapsed, or, whatever else lowers the car down, or something like that. To which point they can, because at the moment it's saying, well, yeah, your wishbone broke because you went over the curb, but rules are rules and you're disqualified. So it's basically saying, then don't race hard, which is what we want as fans in the British touring cars.
Yeah.
Surely that's something they could do, Connor, isn't it? Surely.
I think you're all a bit het up on, oh no, my favourite driver got disqualified. Everyone changed the rules immediately. Yeah, as our producer is shouting loudly into our ears, stop moaning. I understand why he was disqualified, and look, I appreciate it was a unfortunate incident. It wasn't his fault. He went on the grass, yada yada. We've gone through that, but these things happen, and it's not as if it's not as if the driver is immune to being part of the team, as it were. It's very common for scrutineering teams to say, oh, the car number XX has been disqualified for such and such reason. It's not. I'm not saying it's common, but it's not regular that they will call the driver's name first. It will always be the car number usually, and they do this because what they're checking is the car illegal. It's a technical scrutineering team. They're not talking about the driver's personality or mental health or anything along that lines. It's about the engineering side of the car, and the car is in this sense engineered incorrectly. There is a team element to all of this. Why would the team build a car that brakes in a certain way? Ross picked up on Jimmy Johnson incident with one of his team building an illegal part, and then Johnson would just basically destroy the part before it got to scrutineering, so no one could officially tell. And sure, the driver can have an impact in all of this, but ultimately it's a technical decision. And yeah, the realities of the race can sometimes be very frustrating. And there is perhaps an argument here of going, well, if the car is damaged, there should be some other way to, enforce it, as it were, because, a simple roller under the thing, while very universal, isn't very adaptable. But of course, you have the other problem here, which is, well, if you create a more adaptable system to, he broke a suspension, so we'll use another different type of tool to do ride height checks or whatever other checks you want to do, then you just introduce another way for the team to, jerry the rules and for, to bend how they can do things. Oh, no, it failed this? Oh, well, you better use the backup test. And weigh the car in another way, or do the ride height in another way. Look, it passed it in the alternative way. We just damaged it during the race. Honest gov. In that vein, and team, they will do anything they can to get an advantage. Weighing before the race, I like the idea of that, because as you say, they're not going to change the ride height during the race, because who has the money? But on the flip side of that, depending how much Toyota or Honda or any of the other manufacturers who put a lot of manufacturer money into this, I would not be surprised if there is a small scale arms race to make sure they build in moving suspensions or whatever solution they come up with, to ensure that whatever ride height they weigh before the race isn't the same ride height that is run during the race. But again, that produces the backwards problem, which is, well, if they're going to do that, why not just lift it at the end of the race type thing? Why not just create an active suspension that lifts it at the end of the race? So there is an argument to, well, you move it either side, they can just jerry around with it like that. Ride heights have always been an issue with BTCC, and one that maybe we can come up with a better solution in the future. But for the minute, a simple solution that everyone has to follow and is very easy to enforce is one that is very difficult to create loopholes around. There's if we want to make real world examples about this, the countries that have the biggest sort of tax loophole problems are the countries that have incredibly long tax laws, while the ones again, producers shouting in my ear for that one, but the countries with very, very short tax codes are the ones who get most of their citizens to pay tax, and there's a reason for that. Simple rules, it's very hard to break them.
Well, there we go. We've obviously got tax advice there on the BTCC talks, of course. We provide everything. But we're going on to our sort of final, and this is a big discussion, something that I think needs to be said, while at the same time it's something that probably a lot of people are tired of hearing, and it's track limits. And the simple question, why are track limits enforced in British touring cars? Because let's face it, what circuits in the UK can you actually gain an advantage by running over the track limits?
Silverstone turn 1.
But can you though? Is going wide on cops quicker?
Yes.
Than,
yes.
Well, I don't think it is.
Yes. Should I just say yes again, Josh? Yes.
This is the debate, right? Because when you watch the race,
turn 1.
but again, right. Hear me out. Don't stop interrupting me. Right, I run the show.
Right, go on, Josh.
I run the show with a cold iron fist, and I will run the show. Right. So, my argument is, okay, you watch the program. Everyone ran wide at cops, right? Everyone, but only a few of the drivers got involved in track limits. So where was the track limit line? And I was looking at it, and I think where they were running was the fast line. But I think any wider than that, they would have lost speed because they'd have run too wide. The corner it wouldn't have worked. Same thing with Alton Park. The track limit section, to get all four wheels off the curb, you are running essentially on grass, which is not the fastest line. So surely, if they want to do that line, let them, because it's not going to make their car much, even if it makes it like 0.1 of a second quicker. So what? It makes, again, racing more fun. And I know you got to say, well, yeah, but it's cheating. But it's not really. It's just someone running slightly wide over a curb, losing a bit of time, or running slightly wide over the grass, bouncing around the grass, damaging his car, or someone running slightly wide at cops, coming back on and creating a bit of a traffic jam. So if you penalise drivers, again, you get involved in the championship. That surely you want a championship that's done on the track. So Connor, I'll let you start off this discussion. Why don't we just drop track limits?
Because it's cheating. Like, honestly, Josh, considering we just had a long argument about, we should change some of the ride height rules because, it's just a little bit of ride height. It's just a few millimeters. What does it matter? But we've got a similar situation here. It's just a few meters, guys. Few meters off the track. What could go wrong? What does it matter? If we're talking about qualifying here, qualifying comes down to, hundredths of a second. It comes down to absolute tiny margins. And if you can run into a section and gain 0.2 of a second, especially around a very short circuit like Silverstone, then you're going to get a massive advantage for that. And so why wouldn't you, cheat, as it were, or, bend the rules? The major issue here is, well, what do you say about how the stewards have been doing track limits? I know you mentioned about only some of the drivers got called up for track limits, but surely that's a bigger issue with the stewards themselves. Surely everyone should be pulled in for track limits. I'm trying to remember the series now, and I'm going to look like a fool if I don't remember this correctly. But I believe it was one of the TOCA support series a couple of years back. It might have been GT5. I think it might have been something.
It was probably Ginetta Juniors. They tend to.
It wouldn't surprise me if
do racing lines.
It would not surprise me if it was Ginetta Juniors. And basically, they ended up calling 75% of the field into the steward's office after the race to go, look, you've all broken track limits. You've all made mistakes. This cannot happen again, or we will be dishing out penalties. And the warning was given to everyone on that track is, you are all breaking the rules. You are all doing something illegal. You can't just copy the person in front of you and assume that you'll be fine if you do it in enough numbers, basically. And sure enough, I remember there being a point sort of the race afterwards where 10-second penalties were just being handed out left, right, and centre, and you ended up with whatever it was, like 10 drivers or whatever, end the race with penalties, and it made it a complete mess to try and figure out who actually finished where, because everyone was just getting penalties because they weren't obeying the rules. So there has to be a limit somewhere about where these rules are. Now, whether that be the direct white line, how many wheels have to be over the white line, do the curbs count? It's okay to make those differences depending on the circuit or whatever, but you've got to make it clear. If it is just arbitrary, then drivers are going to take it arbitrarily and they're going to gain this advantage. So yeah, track limits has to be something you enforce. Otherwise, you do just end up with the other thing is dangerous situations, because we're talking about turn one here at Silverstone, but if you I'm trying to think of another valid example to this, because a lot of fortunately it's not a major issue in the UK because we have a lot of non-tarmac sections, as it were. But we all make a big thing about track limits on the inside of a corner, as it were. What about the final chicane in Donington or whatever? Why would you not just straight line that chicane if we're talking about no track limits at all? I think a lot of the concern always comes from the track limits on the outside of the circuit, but we all sort of have a mutual understanding that, well, you don't just cut the corner in a sense of, track limits on the inside are fine. But it's always a case of, well, what do you have on the outside? And COPS is a very unique issue on the touring car calendar because, as mentioned, we go around a lot of British circuits that still have their grass runoffs or gravel runoffs in the case of things like Brands Hatch, Paddock Hill or whatever. So, running wide serves you no advantage whatsoever because you will crash. COPS is such a unique issue with the Touring Car Championship. I can see the argument to why you can be like, well, just ignore it. This is going to be a one-off event or whatever. But then you end up with the whole sort of, IndyCar at COTA situation in which everyone just takes the lines they want. In which case, the other issue then is you shorten the distance between what is the new edge of the track and the barrier. And a lot of barriers in, a lot of circuits are designed for cars to go off and have enough room for them to go off and slow down before they hit the barrier. If you've just extended effectively the end of the track limit by 50 meters or whatever, then you've effectively also reduced the runoff area. And so you've made the entire track unsafe now because you haven't the track isn't homologated for that. So, if anyone does crash into that turn one, they've only got 30 meters of runoff now before they hit the barrier rather than 200 meters of runoff or, something to that effect.
The thing is COPS is unique because, as I said, there's not many corners in the UK that have that much runoff. But, there is always a limit on these exits of the corner, especially COPS, where you run too wide and end up slowing the car and end up becoming too slow. But at the same time, if you got rid of the track limits, right? Yeah, you'll have people take whatever lines and all this, like you said, but you won't have people shortcutting the track because why would you? Right? Most of the, it just wouldn't work, right? It just generally wouldn't work. You wouldn't be able to, like at Donington, the final chicane. If you shortcut that, you will generally break the bottom of your car, and you will not be able to turn, and you will hit the barrier. If you want to know what I mean, Jason Plato in the MG took the inside of the curb, hit the yellow curb, and then broke the front suspension, which drove him straight into the barrier, and he was out the race because he tried to straight line that chicane.
You've still got other corners like Thruxton, though, where you could easily straight line that and just gain a load of time.
Not anymore, you can't. They've got big tyre barriers in the way. They've dealt with that. So maybe, but it was, I was watching COPS and I was just sitting there going, you were hearing, so-and-so's getting a warning for track limits. But where was the track limits? It wasn't clear. But because that's what I'm saying. It's like, even if you don't make it clear, which they didn't, right? The director, our producer's saying it was the white line, but I don't think it was.
The thing is, Josh, just let me jump in. Is some circuits now have pressure points to determine where the track limit is. So if you hit that pressure point, you are going to get pinged for track limits. But is that something they need to adapt at Silverstone? But this is what I'm trying to say. Is it's going to cause a lot of debate. It's going to cause a lot of probably not arguments, but probably people are going to be 50-50, either positive about it or very negative. So, some circuits that have pressure points. So why isn't it all integrated at every other track?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, they've got pressure points. I think that's only in the MSVR circuits at the moment. They've got those circuit sensors, isn't it? Yeah, but that's it. Why can't they put it in the other circuits? Because another one of the track limits is obviously not kill. The exit at the first corner, they all run wide there, but that's obviously a really bad decision because it ruins the second corner and then ruins the entry into the third corner. So, there's arguments for both ways. I mean, Ross, it's a weird debate, isn't it? Because it's like, obviously, as Connor says, you need track limits, but as I'm saying, it's like, well, it would make it more fun without it.
It's not a weird debate, Josh. I'm going to be honest. You're being really, really stupid right now. There's a white line, and you don't go over the white line. It used to be that when over the white line, you'd hit some grass, and then you'd hit a bank, and then you'd usually either hit spectators or a tree. That's why there was track limits. It's only coming to fruition now, and there's 1 billion miles of runoff, which I'm not saying is a bad thing. That's a good thing. I like having runoff there. It stops people dying. But it's just respect the track limits. It's not too hard. If you overextend the track, you've overextended. Just get your lap time deleted. Yeah, in some situations, it's bad. Knock on turn 1. I'll agree. That's bad, but you've still broken the rules. So you should still get your lap time deleted. I agree that there are some ways I think track limits should be changed. I in a lot of scenarios actually think that a lot of corners the track should be the curb and not the white line. So I think for some corners you should be allowed to run 2 wheels on the curb, not have 2 wheels still on the tarmac. That's just from the nature of the corner. That's just where the corner is. No name is Spa. Actually, Jack the X-Corner. That Spa comes to mind. Hops is not like you should be allowed to use all the curb hops. But it changed series to series, from race to race, from track to track. But at the end of the day, they're a rule. They need to respect it, allow fair racing, and been there for a long time. I don't know why we're getting upset about it in the last few years. Oh, he's extended track limits. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, tell him to take his lap time off.
It's like if you play F1 on the Xbox or PlayStation, you get done for track limits, you get done for track extending. So why?
Or you turn them off and just make your own way around the track.
Well, like I did. Isn't it? It's no one else.
And that's why, Josh, you're not a Formula One driver.
It is indeed, but it is why I'm always right and hence we're running. And on that note, it is time to go. Of course, go onto our Twitter, our Facebook, and continue this discussion, please, because obviously we all know that I'm right and everyone else is wrong in this discussion. So obviously continue this discussion, and of course, we always read and comment, and if we agree, think your comment is decent enough and right enough, we might even mention it. But chances are that probably won't happen because I'm the only one right in the show.
If you can comment better than Josh, then you've already deserved more of a spot on this show than Josh does. But there you go. It's not even that difficult now.
Exactly. Yes, joining us on the show, of course, was Andy Hockley, Connor Jackson, and of course Ross McIntyre. Continue on social media, and of course stay posted on our radio, because coming up next is probably what will be an exciting debate on Sochi and a certain 100. So from the BTCC talks, good night.
It's Motorsport Radio.